I've had a few people write to me, more than a few, concerning what happened about, 2 weeks ago or so. That statue that was presented and uncovered in Detroit, Michigan, a few weeks back. A very controversial statue, which was unveiled by the Satanic Temple in a ceremony. Supposedly, it was supposed to be a secret ceremony, but nobody could really keep a secret about that, I guess. And how it attracted a lot of protests. And they're wondering who is this goat-headed figure. If you got BAP 1, put it up. That's what was unveiled by the Satanic Temple. This goat-headed figure. It's about 9 feet tall. This winged creature, which has become known as Baphomet. Baphomet. Just keep it on there until I take it off. And it's flanked by 2 small children, a boy on the right of the screen and a girl on the left. Baphomet. Now, I've taught on Baphomet in the past. It's somewhere in the Last Day series. And this statue is about 9 feet tall. And hundreds of Satanists turned out to see this creature unveiled. Now, the objective was, by the Satanic Temple, which, by the way, this cost about $100 to produce, was to move it after the unveiling about 900 miles south and erect it next to or opposite of the 10 Commandments monument outside of Oklahoma City's Capitol building. Now, of course, the Oklahoma Supreme Court ruled that the use of state property to benefit a religion is banned under the state constitution. So, the faith of both the Satanist statue and the 10 Commandments that was just recently torn down and removed is now unclear what you see on the screen is going to happen to it. Now, you come back to me for a few moments. Everybody was screaming. Everybody I met in the Christian world, how dare they tear down the 10 Commandments statue monument. And they removed it in the middle of the night. I guess they didn't want the press there, or Christians protesting, or maybe non-Christians. I think it's quite amusing, to tell you the truth. How the event, or the events leading up to the removal of the 10 Commandments took place. The ACLU for the most part, just another demonic extension of evil. Threaten that will continue suing the state until they were allowed to put that statue that you just saw on the screen opposite next to the Ten Commandments. And of course, they used the First Amendment argument as their foundation. And how can you argue with that? Listen, I was criticized for saying a few years back the Constitution is flawed, and it starts with the very First Amendment. And the constitutions out there turned me off and branded me as a heretic. What did Jesus say? I give you now a new commandment. Paraphrase, to love God and to love one another. It didn't say to love gods. And that's what exactly the First Amendment allows. To love gods. Not to love the God, but to love gods. And the government cannot form an established religion of any one God. And I don't care who you listen to, they're blind as a bat. And these type of people worship the founding fathers without really digging in and having insight to what they believe in and how they laid it down. Most of them were deists, which allowed the free will. And I understand God allows the free will because He wants you to make a choice whom you're going to serve. The God of this world or Jesus Christ. Or the God that created this world. I understand all those arguments. But don't tell me the Constitution is not flawed in the view of God's eyes. Maybe not in your eyes. It is the same God that was a jealous God according to Scriptures. It's the same God that hated the worshiping of other gods. You see it all through the Old Testament. God in His mercy trying to get the children of Israel from worshiping foreign gods. They would be punished. They would come back to God, and they fall right back into adoring other foreign gods, mostly the moon god and the sun god. And God punished them again. Calamities happened. They were oppressed. God rescues them again. Give about 20 or 30 years, they fall back in the same pattern over and over and over to the point where God had enough. And He said no more. He took the tribes of the north, carried them into bondage, allowed the Assyrian Empire to carry them into bondage. And of course, the tribes of the south, Judah being the most predominant one, were taken by the Babylonian Empire in Nebuchadnezzar. The tribes in the north became the lost tribes of Israel when they're not lost. And the tribes of the south, Judah being the predominant one, became known as the Jews. You know the history. God's a jealous God. And when Jesus gave us a new commandment, the option wasn't there to love all these other gods, which the First Amendment allows. Well, isn't the Constitution ordained by God? That's what constitutions want you to believe. Do I believe that? No. I think throughout history, God allows certain things to play out. He gives room to see where man will go with things. He allows them enough room to make choices. The problem with man, most of the time, it's bad choices. That's because sin permeates our being. Which influences the bad choices that we make. So, even though, compared to just about every other system in this world today, it's one of the better governmental systems that keeps government in check, less and less of that every day in this country, that there exists out there in the world. But it's still flawed. And I'm amused how people are in an uproar because there was a possibility before they took down those 10 commandments, according to Oklahoma Supreme Court ruling, they could have took it further. They could even have the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court chose to do so, listen to their case. There was no guarantee that that was going to happen. So what did the state of Oklahoma decide to do? Remove the 10 commandments and not appeal further up in the courts. Because if they hadn't, you really think about it, that statue, put it up again, Baphomet, would probably be sitting near or opposite of the 10 commandments today. Freedom of religion. Freedom to express what you believe in. Satanists believe in this idol. And this idol has a long history. It's been called many different things throughout its history. Some people, scholars, track it all the way back to the Egyptians. I track it back even further. But it's kind of evolved along history's timeline. And it's been called different things along the last few millenniums. Presently it's called Baphomet. Now, before I go into why it's called Mahomet, let's try to decode what this evil statue is supposed to present or represent. Now, the name Baphomet, there's scholars that disagree with what I'm about ready to say, and there's scholars that do agree with it. The names date back to Inquisition and torture of Knights Templars about 1100 AD, who, according to the French chroniclers of the Crusades, confessed to worshiping a heathen idol called Baphomet. Some scholars believe Baphomet was simply a corruption of Mahomet, M-A-H-O-M-E-T, which represented the prophet Mohammed. You got to remember, Western Europeans love their icons, love their statues. Love their buildings. And even though some will argue that it's against Islam to create a statue of representing anyone, including Muhammad, it doesn't mean if Western Europeans were influenced by Islam and the Prophet Muhammad that they would not alter that some way because they wanted to include it in their culture and how they did things and how they developed. Their following that also are attracted to buildings, statues, any type of icon. So some scholars believe that Baphomet was simply a corruption of Mahomet, the Prophet Muhammad. Now, the best known modern image of Baphomet was drawn in 1856 by the French occultist Levi in his book Transcendental Magic. It's a doctrine and ritual. Transcendental Magic. It's a doctrine and ritual. He envisioned a winged hermaphrodite with a torch between his horns and a pentagram on his forehead. You can see that right there in the picture. Its arms bore the Latin words solve, which means separate, and cogula, which means joined together. The powers, what it really means is the powers of binding and loosing, usurped from God. Levi's drawing was the inspiration of the Satanic Temple's new monument. It contains all these binary opposites, above and below, part animal, part human, male and female. It embodies opposites and celebrates contrasts. Now, the two-finger salute that you see there, the left side of your screen, the right hand of this beast, the two-finger salute on the right hand point up, and two on the left hand point down. Meaning as above, so below. These words and the accompanying gestures are familiar to occultists. They are drawn from the ancient works of Hermes Trismegistus, whose writing became popular during the Renaissance and Reformation. The phrase is also used in relation to science, the universe, and God. But Levi wrote that by making the gesture, his Baphomet expresses the perfect harmony of mercy with justice. Now, the two young children, what's that all about? Now, these Satanists were hoping that these children are perceived as a beautiful work of art, and these children was not afraid of this beast-like creature because there was nothing to be afraid of. The goat's face has a neutral expression. It's not demonic, ferocious, or monstrous, as people make out to be, according to the Satanists that developed this. Now, the Satanists that contracted this beast to be created in this image that you see on the screen, they think that children approaching the monument without being primed by propaganda will find anything horrific about it. And they claim that we're not about indoctrinating children. Oh, really? Is that what your statue there is telling us? That you're not indoctrinating children? And why even have children in the statue? Your message is you don't want children to be fearful of the satanic image. They go on to claim, for the most part, children are forced into religion. That's something we definitely don't care to do. Well, I can't say what I want to say, but what a bunch of liars. That's exactly what they're trying to do. On the Baphomet stomach is an old Greek symbol of two serpents entwined around a staff, the staff which was carried by Hermes and Hermes in general. The Caduceus symbol, trade negotiating, was co-opted into Behemoth by Levi. For us, it symbolizes the recognition of the opposite, such as having a satanic monument opposite a Christian one. We think that's a powerful message when it's sitting opposite the Ten Commandments. You can have these dualities, differences, without conflict. Levi's behemoth was a hermaphrodite with breasts, but we took the breasts off. The temple did not want to get embroiled in debate about gender, which might distract from what it believes are the most important message of Baphomet. Instead, he says the boy girl in the statue there reflects the male-female dualism. As far as the pentagram on the top there, the image caption an early rendering of the statue and throne featuring the inverted pentagram, seen both on the forehead of the Baphomet and on the throne behind him. The pentagram is a widely recognized satanic symbol and often appears inverted. St. Peter's cross is often inverted too, as it was during the Satanic Temple's unveiling ceremony. This inversion is Satan's perception. It asks people to reconsider their cultural grounding, look at the evidence, and reconsider their values. That's according to Satanists. It's Satanists that developed this. They also said you have this one-sided vision with institutionalized religion and their moral correctness. It prevents them considering whether they could be incorrect today on issues such as gay marriage and reproductive rights. It's true you don't have to identify with Satan to take on the causes, but the image of Satan resonates for us. That's their words. The torch between the horns. The torch of knowledge is the middle horn. It glorifies the pursuit of knowledge. We put a high value on that and really central to our beliefs in general. This is all their words I'm reading to you, folks. As Levi wrote, the flame of intelligence shining between his horns is the magic light of the universal balance. The image of the soul elevated above matter as a flame, while being tied to the matter shines above it. The inscriptions, these have yet to be added, but the Satanic Temple gave details of their plans in a statement last year. On the front of the statue above the inverted pentagram will be one of Satanic's Temple's 7 fundamental tenets. Quote, the spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. End of quote. The back of the stone slab will display a passage from Lord Byron's dramatic work, Cain, that reads, quote, then who was a demon? He who would not let ye live, or he who would have made ye live forever in the joy and power of knowledge. In other words, God brought death on to all human beings because of Adam's sin. Sin would let you live on. And he would provide you joy. He would let you live forever and give you the power of knowledge, all knowledge. That's briefly what that symbolizes according to the Satanic Temple that produced it. Now, Behemoth is nothing new. You can trace this back millenniums, including the lost tribes, by the way. Put up the second picture, BAP 2. Well, no, put a third picture. That was Levi's picture. Look at this picture. This was their form of Baphomet. The Celtics produced this image. The Celtics comprised mostly of the lost tribes of Israel, even being punished. And the reasons why they were punished was known to them. But as they left the bondage of the Assyrian Empire and went northwest through Europe they carry this image with them. You can see the sun, the moon, the stars. They still kept worshiping the creation instead of the Creator. And this is their version of Baphomet. You can see the moon on the left, sun on the right. And it's all inverted, by the way, if you haven't noticed that in the picture. Now, put on the next picture. This actually Bap 2 now. That's Levi's rendition. The moon, worship the moon god. The horns, the pentagram, and so forth. Now, let me read you a little bit of history about Baphomet. Now, I'm not going to give you all the history that dates back thousands of years, called different things, by the way, throughout its history. But it's still the same beast that people, for some reason, want to bow down and worship. In fact, you could put, if you could half screen it, put the first picture up and me in the other half, if it's possible. If it's not, then just keep it on me. Baphomet is a deity, demon, and or symbolic icon which originated in the 14th century. Well, it originated way beyond that. It goes back thousands of years. But let's just take this author's versions for now. Which originated in the 14th century, a supposed figure of worship of the Knights Templar. In those accounts, Baphomet was described as inscribed head or human skull. The name Baphomet originally was a deformation of the name of Mohammed, the prophet of Islam. Claims that Templars were worshiping Baphomet meant in fact that they were secret Muslims. Medieval European folklore did not recognize that Islam was a monotheistic faith and imagined instead that Muslims prayed and sacrificed to a number of terrifying, evil, imaginary deities. In the 19th century, French occultist Levi formulated the modern conception of the figure via an illustration portraying it with wings, a horned goat's head, and an emblazoned pentagram. That's that Bap 2 picture, if you want to put it up again. That's Levi's conception of Baphomet. The Freemasons were thereafter accused of worshiping it, after it was incorporated into the theology of Thelema and turned into an icon of Levian Satanism. Owing to Levi's drawing on these associations, the figure, in a similar manner to Baal and Moloch, has become virtually synonymous with Satan in popular conscience. In 1307, you come back to me, King Philip IV of France owed a lot of money to the Templars. And he was furthermore pissed at them because they wouldn't let him become a member, and figured he could weasel out of it and take revenge on his creditors by slamming them into oblivion. On October 13th, that's why if October 13th lands on a Friday, it's considered bad luck. On October 13th, he ordered the arrest of hundreds within France on charges of all all the usual suspects: heresy, apostasy, idolatry, devil worship, money laundering, homosexual orgies, etc., and had them tortured until they confessed to anything he wanted them to hear. The worship of Baphomet was not unto itself one of the charges, like some, by the way, falsely have presented that as history. The worship of Baphomet was not unto itself one of the charges. However, a handful of these internees brought the name up on their own accord. It should be noted that Templars' account of the figure offered at this point was different from that of the modern conception, described variously as an idol with a human skull, a head with two faces, a cat idol, or a bearded head. Whatever the case, the figure supposedly served a role in the Templars' initiation ceremonies. The image that everyone envisions when they hear the name Baphomet that of a winged humanoid goat with a pair of breasts and a torch on his head between his horns, gesturing towards 2 crescent moons. Did not appear until over 500 years after the business with the Templars. This image comes from Levi, 1854. Dogme et ritual de la haute magique, in English known as transcendental magic. Levi's depiction, for all its fame, is not particularly authentic to the historical description from the Templar trials. Although it is not unlike gargoyles found on several Templar-built churches, or Villette de Duc's vivid gargoyles added to Notre Dame de Paris about the same time as Levi's illustration. Levi's Baphomet also appears to be strongly influenced by the depiction of the devil in the Tarot de Marseille. In turn, Levi's Baphomet image influenced the design of devil's cards and later tarot cards made for the occult market. You look at the tarot cards of today, you'll find a Le Diable card or the Devil card. All non-occult scholars consider the name Baphomet to be a deformation of the Latinized Mahomet, or Mahomet, Mahomet, a medieval European rendering of Mohammed, the name of the prophet of Islam. Accusations of worshiping Baphomet therefore meant that the Templars were being accused of being secret Muslims. In medieval European folklore, Muslims were fancied to be pagans, worshiping Muhammad as a deity, in addition to other fictional deities. This seems clear from the accounts of the Templar trials, which mention Allah and Muhammad in addition to Baphomet. And I repeat, at that time period, that's what Baphomet meant to them. But Baphomet has taken a lot of different figures, and it was displayed as several different deities throughout its history that dates back all the way, I believe, to Nimrod's day, Samira's day, and even Cush. It just transformed into different deities as it traveled around. Modern day, it is Baphomet. This seems clear from the accounts of the Templar trials, which mentions Allah and Muhammad in addition to Baphomet. Gerson de Montpezat, a knight of Provence, said that their superior showed him an idol made in the form of Baphomet, Baphomet. Another name, Raymond Rubai, described it as a wooden head on which the figure of Baphomet was painted, and adds that, quote, that he worshipped it by kissing its feet and exclaiming, Yalla, Y-A-L-L-A, which was, he says, verbum sacre norium, a word taken from the Saracens. A Templar of Florence declared that in the secret chambers of the order, one brother said to another, showing this idol, adore this head is your God and your Mahomet. The Templars were an army with themselves within the Crusades. And the history of it once you study it, reveals that some of these Templars were converted to Muhammad-believing Islamists. And they carried this back with them. And the Templars became very rich and very powerful. The King of France wanted them to be under his control. And he couldn't get them under his control, therefore he wanted them eliminated. The king used to borrow large sums of money to rule his kingdom. And when the king couldn't pay them back, he would just give them land. So they became wealthier, more powerful, controlling land. So he devised a plot against the Templars. Now, in the trials, they were accused of many different things. This didn't come up, but some confessed to it. And these are some of the things that came from the trials and how they worship Mahomet. And this is head is your God and your Mahomet. Now, they eventually got the Pope, the king got the Pope to back him up. And an army was formed that seized about 5,000 Templars, take their possessions, throw them in prisons. The Inquisition started, and eventually they were killed for the most part. Not all, but most of them. So, a Templar of Florence declared that in the secret chapters of the order, one brother said to another, showing the idol, quote, adore this head, or adore this head. This head is your God and your Mahomet. Similar, Osterk of Aurillac, a 13th century troubadour, in A Deus per quis faca de gran maleza, which means, it mentions Behemoth in the same passage as deities alleged worship by Muslims. I'll read you what their language says, and I'll read you the translation. Per queres razo cuhum humas dio de graça, y corazón Baphomet, leones tervegan se compañía, which means, so now it's reasonable that we abandon God and that we worship Mahomet there where he stands and his companions, and Termagant and his companions. There was no doubt some of these Templars converted to Islam. And now their behemoth was basically a skull they worshipped. Some had horns and so forth, which represented their icon, their statue of their time, Muhammad. And of course, I'm not going to get into it. Let's get that said enough. There's been all kinds of supposedly scholars, some of them Islamists and some of them Satanists, that try to discredit this and say, no, it's not so. Put up that first picture again, Bath 1. I understand why the state of Oklahoma finally said, we'll just not keep appealing this, and we'll just take the Ten Commandments down, the monument. Because if they didn't, they would have eventually lost, my friend. According to the Oklahoma State Supreme Court ruling, it gave them an out. They rather take down the monument and not appeal it. Because during an appeal process, that means these Satanists could have possibly erected this evil sight you see on the screen opposite of the Ten Commandments. And if the Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court, if they would have heard it, and they would rule in favor, say, the Christians that wanted to keep, and the people that wanted to keep the monuments up, it would have gave an in for these Satanists to sue the state and say, foul. If you're allowed to put this up, we're allowed, because this is our religion, to put this up, what you see on the screen. It's not very complicated. So once the Oklahoma State Supreme Court came down with their decision, they said, okay, that's good enough for us. We'll take down the 10 Commandments, but in doing so, you cannot also put this up. Now, what are these Satanists doing? What is Satanic Temple and their band of lawyers are trying to do now? Well, Arkansas also has a 10 Commandments monument. And now they're trying to press that state to allow them to put this statue up. And my prediction is, as goes Oklahoma, so will go Arkansas. And anywhere, eventually, that you see a monument that has any biblical references to it. Evil's on the march, my friend. And constitutional lovers cannot argue their point successfully where they include one religious belief but leaves out another, because it then would be unconstitutional. That's our flaw in our First Amendment. If you allow one religion to practice what they believe in, you have to allow another religion to practice what they believe in. You can't exclude just because they're different from you. Does God approve of that? All you have to do is read the scriptures and see for yourself. No. Why? Because he's a jealous God. In the book of Romans, 1st chapter, read it again. Remind yourself why he's a jealous God. And we live in a day and age in this country I believe Satan wants to bring down this country, because as goes the United States, goes the world. And it's slowly happening. Now, I believe also God will allow it to go so far, and then he will intervene. And this country will be brought to his knees and recognize the one true God, just as the state of Israel in the Middle East. God will have the last laugh. Not these Satanists, not the atheists, not all the other false religions or no religions at all. He will have the last laugh. Everyone's going to bow to the true God and recognize he is the only God. All these other gods are just a fabrication of created by Satan. That was his plan, to distract mankind from recognizing the true God. It didn't bother me one bit. The 10 Commandments went down. Furthermore, we don't live under the law. We have new commandments. As a Christian, that should be easily recognizable. Why? Not to make a big deal over the 10 Commandments. Well, you're just allowing Satan to take over the country. My friend, he's the God of this world. He's not even a God, but he's the ruler of this world. Him and his evil minions. But one is coming, and we, the church, are supposed to resist. Not resist because of monuments that declare that we're still underneath the law of bondage. We live in a time of grace that's provided by Jesus Christ. That released us from the law and all the hindrances that it kept us from being a true born-again person that Christ eventually provided for us through his sacrifice. I don't want to slip back into the law. And I really don't care if you tear down all the 10 Commandments. And I know I'm going to have some people really aggravated with me when I say that. And even the new commandment that Christ gave. If that was made into a monument and was torn down, so what? This is the monument. I'm pouring flesh and blood that he's concerned with. Not some man-made creation that you stick on the ground somewhere or put it on a building. It's flesh and blood. We are his monuments. And we are to be declaring and professing the statement of why we are followers of him and disciples of him. And providing the message of grace and mercy and salvation that he provided. You're a living, walking monument, not something made out of cement. But a monument that Christ has put his Spirit in to be the testimony, to be the witness, to be one of the definitions of a true martyr, which is a witness of him. Just think how better off this country would be if all of us had that attitude. This is the monument that Christ wants to reveal to the world. Not something that you build with man's hands. Not something man creates. Well, God in the Old Testament had altars and monuments as the children of Israel would travel from place to place. That's true. As a reminder, you can't find any of those things around any longer, by the way. But what lives on is flesh and blood. And you find nowhere in the New Testament monuments being built to remind us of what we're all about in Christ. Christianity is weak, and it's weak because of silly Christians that want to adapt what the world does. Well, we're not in this world. We're in this world, but we're not of this world. So start acting like it. And those of you who got upset because you saw the monuments being, the Ten Commandment monument being taken away in the middle of the night, I'd rather it be taken away in the middle of the night than staying there and putting Mahomet right next to it. Because I know that's all they could lean on as their testimony, a created image of evil. But with us, unless they start slaughtering us, all true born-again Christians, this monument lives on, and it testifies the wonderful salvation of Jesus Christ and all that he provides. Be concerned with the living monument, not monuments that are dead, don't say much, and even the message that they do declare, it's outdated. Because Christ has come and made things new. New for us and new for anyone that we witness that to. Stop living in the past and stop getting on the bandwagon of all these silly Christians and constitutionalists that are crying foul. Anything that man has put into motion that they created is skewed, including this Constitution. It's the best thing out there in today's present world, no doubt, but it's still skewed in God's eyes. Because when push comes to shove, see if you could throw the First Amendment at the judgment seat of Christ. Or better yet, the great white throne judgment, if you don't get to the judgment seat of Christ. See if you could use the First Amendment on Christ at that facing of presenting yourself, facing Him, of why you believe certain things and why He should allow you to have eternal life. See if that's going to work. See if throwing the First Amendment is going to really work at the white throne judgment. You have to let me in, Jesus. I stood on the Constitution First Amendment. And I stood fighting for that monument that everybody wanted to tear down. He cares less about those things, my friend. He cares less about it. Start living in the things that He cares about. And I said, as I said, be a living testimony, a living monument of His grace, mercy, and peace that He provides. Stop living in the dead world and start living in the world that gives eternal life. Most of man's causes down here are pathetic. If it wasn't for technology, you think man as an existence of 6,000 years have improved much? Take technology out of the equation. Man is still man. He still has sin in his heart. And he's always looking for ways to follow something else instead of the one true God and His only begotten Son. But everything is going to come to an end someday, and you're going to have to answer for it. And what is your answer going to be? I was a living testimony, a living monument of Jesus Christ, or someone that believed in man-made ways and traditions that stood up for Jesus Christ? He's going to say, I never knew you. Well, I stood up for the monument. No, you didn't. Because a true monument is Jesus Christ, not some stone. And that's my opinion. You can do what you want with it. But I'm not shocked, and I really don't care that they took down the Ten Commandments. I really believe the state went, whew. I'd rather not have the Ten Commandments up there, but if I have to put Mahomet up alongside it. In my opinion, if that happened, in an indirect way, it's another slap in the face by the evil minions that know exactly what it means. The eighth beast entered in, using a different avenue to keep penetrating and breaking down, to eventually becoming the beast that rules this world. Now, that's all I have to say about it. The study of Baphomet would take me weeks to go through with you if I trace it all the way back to Nimrod's day. But I don't want to waste more of my time on that issue. As far as I'm concerned, I can melt that down, that statue, and eliminate it from my sight, because I know what it truly represents. And someday that's going to happen. I got news for you, Satanists. You don't even realize how you're pushing out there to the world the eighth beast. But some of us do recognize it for what it is. And I thank God that He's given me sight to see light. Now, I want to hear from you. Play a song.